signed up to a quilting course all those years ago, the first thing I got to learn was patchwork, but then I was called a quilter. So what is the difference between those two anyway? Are they the same thing? Are they different? It's enough to make anybody's head completely explode, which is why I am here to explain the difference to you so you can rock up to your local quilt shop and ask the questions with complete and utter confidence. Who am I? I am Kim. This is Quilt with Kim. You, my lovely, are very, very welcome. Let's go find out what this difference is anyway. First up, patchwork and quilting are definitely two different things. So there's the short answer to your question. But hold on, because patchwork is really the younger sister to quilting. There have been records of quilting really right back to ancient Egyptian times where they used to quilt their clothes. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Not so much the history, but why we do the quilting. But let's talk about the patchwork first, because that's what we tend to start with. And I suggest if you're a beginner, just start with a very simple patchwork project so you don't get overwhelmed and confused by lots and lots of different things to learn. So patchwork is when we buy fabric from our local quilt shop, whether that's in person, in your local high street, or we go and buy it online. And we buy our fabric normally by yardage. That means it just comes off the bolt and you decide how much you need. But we'll buy some fabric. We will cut that fabric up. I've got all sorts of samples here to show you in all sorts of stages. And they're all different, but here is a strip of fabric that I have taken off a wider piece of this lovely corally fabric here. So we cut our fabric up and then we will stitch our fabric together again. So this whole process is called piecing, where you've taken your fabric, you've cut various bits of fabric up, and we've stitched them back together again. And when we stitch them back together again, grand reveal, drum roll please, we get our pretty pattern, whatever it is. So this bit will be called our quilt top. And whilst I'm not going to go into all the terminology in this particular video, I think it's useful to know what all these stages are called. And this particular star here, if you saw me on Sewing Street a few months ago, that's one of my practice pieces for that. Still not quilted, which brings me very nicely on to, well, what is quilting anyway? Well, quilting is when we're stitching layers of our quilt together. Now I'm showing you this one because this is a bag I'm making that is mid-construction, so you can still see the layers of this. But when we make a quilt, we generally have 3 layers. Not always, but the vast majority of time we have 3 layers. We will have our quilt top. That's your patchwork bit, normally the pretty bit that we like to see. We will have our backing fabric, and that tends to be plain. It doesn't have to be, but we will have our backing fabric, and then we will have wadding or batting in the middle here, and that gives its puffiness or structure. In this case it's a bag, so it's giving it some form and structure. As you can see, it's not very floppy. So in order to hold those 3 layers together, we use quilting. But quilting has extra reasons why we do that. Is that good English? Probably not, but there are extra reasons why we do quilting. So yes, it is to hold those 3 layers together. A quilt top on its own is not very structurally sound because we only use a 1/4 inch seam in our patchwork. And that's not really enough just to hold it together. So what we have is our patchwork top. We have that wadding and batting to give our snuggleability. There's another new word for you. Our snuggle, never mind. That cozy feeling and the backing. So we're holding those 3 layers together. Then that starts giving some stability to our patchwork top, our quilt top, that pretty bit. But we also have a decorative element to our quilting, so it gives us this nice decorative look however we want it. This is a very simple crosshatch. On this one here we've got I've got a table mat where I've just picked out, contour quilted the outside of my star and also inside of the star here. So it can be as simple and as complicated as you'd like to make. But there is another reason. So we've got the functional element of sewing the 3 layers together. We've got decorative of making patterns, whether they're simple or really intricate and complicated, like free motion quilting. But also when we create our quilting, we get little raised areas. And this is because the quilting traps the air in between the stitches. And when you trap air, you get little puffy bits. And then that makes your quilts puffier and warmer and cozier. So the more open your quilting is, and there are some rules for quilting, which I've covered in other videos, but the further apart you quilt your piece, the puffier and cozier it will get, the more sort of bounce and puffiness and squidginess. But if you quilt really tightly together, it will be stiffer. I'll try and show you with these 2 mats here. So this particular one, it's exactly the same design. And by the way, if you want to make these mats, I have a whole course to teach you exactly how to make these, which is an introduction to quilting course. So I'll put the link down below so you can go and check those out. But you can see here we've got a star here which is nice and simply quilted with just some contour quilting, and that's a lot softer to the eye and a lot softer to the feel. It's more malleable as well than this particular one where I've done quite a tight crosshatch, that it's made it a lot stiffer, and the closer that you put your quilting lines together, the stiffer it will get. And this is where we get to our ancient Egyptian friends, because when they were quilting, they obviously needed clothes that were warm. And I'm only guessing here, I'm not a historian, but we've got clothes with probably animal skins and maybe linen that they're trying to bring together to quilt layers together. But they also obviously worked out there's a lovely decorative element to it and that it traps air to make it warm as well. So that's what we're doing with the quilting. Now, there is a really interesting thing, and that is whether you just do patchwork or whether you do patchwork and quilting. And honestly, there are people who prefer just to do the piecing, the patchwork. There are other people who just like to do quilting. Either is fine. This is supposed to be a hobby that brings you joy and pleasure. So you choose which you like to do. If you like to do the both as well, then go for that too. But whichever channel you fall into, you are called a quilter. So right from day one, we take our quilting course. We will learn patchwork because that's the first thing that we need to learn how to do. We will then move on to the quilting, but right from day one, you will be called a quilter or a beginner quilter at that stage. So when you're looking out for courses, whether it's in person or online, you're looking for beginner quilting courses, and they would teach you the beginner at patchwork right through to the quilting. In my own courses, I have actually cheated a little bit and said their introduction to patchwork so that you know there's a difference, and then I introduce you to quilting. But I've just tried to make that a bit easier for you. But you learn patchwork, then you go on to quilting, but you will be called a quilter all the way through. Who knew that one? I hope this has helped. If it has, please don't forget to like, subscribe and hit that notification bell. And if it has, you might want to check out that video just there. I will love you and leave you for now and look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.